Watch right now on the Front News Project. Hell in Pokrovsk. The enemy is storming the city. Putin has given the order to capture Pokrovsk by December 15th. The Ukrainian armed forces are fiercely confronting the enemy. Putin's soldiers have crawled back into the pipe again. The Ukrainian armed forces in Sumy region have cleared out the uninvited guests. Military installations in Crimea and southern Russia are also burning, and Moscow is preparing for a blackout. Flamingo in action. Watch fiery, hot and blazing footage from the front lines right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko, and we will start right away with the main topic. Pokrovsk. The day before, Russian troops launched a massive assault on the city using light vehicles and had some success. At the same time, Ukrainian defenders partially restored logistics routes north of Pokrovsk. So TSN weekly correspondent Alexander Zagorodny will tell and show what's happening at the front's hottest spot. His exclusive report. Let's watch.
We're entering the Lokrovsky district.
What's the scariest thing for journalists at the front? No, not the shelling. The scariest thing is when you're near the front line and don't know the roads. You're not sure you're not driving straight into enemy positions.
So are we heading back already?
I think so too.
Dozens of burned out cars on the road, destroyed houses. We're near Kucheryavy Yar, where fierce fighting was taking place until recently. It's not even kilometers to the enemy positions anymore, just hundreds of meters.
Reverse gear.
Meeting with these fighters from the legendary 25th Sichyslav Airborne Brigade was truly sincere. Now they're a TV host and a producer. But not long ago they were TSN cameramen Ivan Holovach and Alexander Rabinchuk. Each of them has filmed hundreds of reports from the front lines. Now they themselves are defending this country with weapons in their hands. Their work begins at dusk. The fighters quickly assemble the bombers. These are powerful quadcopters. We call them vampires. The enemy calls them Baba Yaga. A fighter with the call sign Krim is testing a new device. Just a few minutes ago, he received an award from the president's hands. Congratulations to you. Do you have an award?
Thank you.
What did they give you?
They awarded me the Order of Courage, 3rd class.
And what about some kind of leave, no? Is it still not the time for leave?
It's not the time for leave yet.
Here, near Pokrovsk, there really is no time for rest right now. The commander with the call sign Bourgeois is urging his guys on. The vampires should already be at the front line. The situation at the front is difficult.
People are working at full capacity, carrying out their tasks directly in Pokrovsk and beyond. Minohrad, Pokrovsk, and our other positions that are still holding out are defending and maintaining our land. There aren't really any positions as such, but groups are slipping through, they're moving and they're being destroyed.
This is how the commander describes the situation in Pokrovsk. The enemy is infiltrating the city in small groups. They do not engage in combat with Ukrainian units. Their main objective is to get into our rear and establish themselves there. It turns into a kind of layered pie. The enemy is in the rear of our forces, but our troops are also in the enemy's rear. Ammunition, gasoline, and food can only be delivered to the outskirts, only at night and with great risk. After that, the bombers get to work. These drones will be flying all night. They won't be bombing enemy positions, they'll be rescuing our soldiers right in Pokrovsk. The first flight is for gasoline. Gasoline means generators, it means charging radios, it means communication.
Some things will break, some won't. We drop them onto the net and then it's up to fate. Here is gasoline for the generator, so the guys can charge their batteries, and Starlink, so they always have a connection.
The enemy has a rough idea of where our positions are and constantly turns on jammers. At this point, it's up to the operator's skill to get their drone out of the enemy air defense zone and back to base. Next run is for food. The guys have run out of supplies. You even send them potatoes?
Of course.
What, they don't want canned stew, they want potatoes?
They don't want stew, they want potatoes. There's also some sausage. What, do you think you can live on just canned stew? Sausage, Snickers, bread, tea, sugar, energy drinks. That's what they order.
The enemy knows the approximate location from where the vampires are launched and is trying by all means to destroy them. Nearby explosions make the cameraman a bit nervous.
What the heck is this?
Almost every position now has something like this contraption. 2 sticks and a bit of foam plastic. This is the Russian drone Molnia, which causes a lot of trouble for Ukrainian fighters. Although it is difficult to call it exclusively Russian because everything on this board is written in Latin. A soldier nicknamed Frenchman emerges from the fog on his marvelous Cossack and in an hour takes us to the Great Land, where enemy shells no longer reach.
Clean plus.
But enemy missiles are still flying. And this is already the Dnipropetrovsk region. The front line is dozens of kilometers away. But the Russians can reach here, and they do. They hit this strategic facility, or more precisely, a strategic store. There was a small complex here, people sold sweet drinks. The local women talk about the tragedy that happened here almost too calmly. No one was killed.
A 65-year-old woman, and the owners said apparently her arm and leg were torn off. And a 5-year-old girl too, either her leg or something else was also torn off.
This is my face, which was sent from the ground drone's camera to the operator's laptop. This is the final test of the ground drone Termite before its first mission to the Chasiv Yar area. Soldiers of the 24th Brigade are holding the defense there.
Today is its first outing. You could say it was taken out of the box today, it was made today. And today it will go to the guys bringing them gasoline, water, and food. Cars no longer go there.
Termites don't last long at the front. They're good for just a few runs, but they can carry hundreds of kilograms of cargo. For example, that very flying vampire, only 15. If this tracked vehicle makes it to the front line, our soldiers will definitely be able to hold out there for several more weeks. Here, in the area of Kostiantynivka, we are working with Ole Petroshuk, the press officer of the 24th Brigade. Foreign media outlets are writing about him now. It was Ole who managed to shoot down an enemy drone in Kostiantynivka right in the middle of a beer. When it was already coming in for an attack, Ole protected himself and a foreign journalist. He got her out of there safe and alive.
This has been a very difficult month for the press working on the front line. 2 journalists have been killed and 6 more have been wounded. That's why we shouldn't forget that this is the work of journalists. It's a small bridge between us and our rear, which helps us understand each other.
It's not the first time Ole has had to shoot down enemy drones. Here's a shot of him blowing up a Pachikun drone on fiber optic cable right in the middle of the road. He saw it, blew it up, and moved on. But he doesn't really want to talk about it. He says that the soldiers on the front line are doing much more than he is. But still, we thank this young guy. Here with him, near Kostiantynivka somehow.
It's calmer now, much more peaceful and quiet than before. You can really feel the difference in the atmosphere. And now let's analyze the operational situation on the much-suffering Kupyansk direction of the front, where the enemy is Zver and Tetun. On the Kupyansk direction, since the beginning of the day, the aggressors have tried 8 times to advance on the positions of our defenders in the areas of Novosinove, Petropavlivka, Pishchane, and Hlushkivka. One battle is still ongoing. And now, another extremely important topic. The enemy has once again brutally shelled Kyiv and the region. But here's the thing. The response to Putin's attempts to plunge Ukraine into darkness has now been felt not only in Belgorod and Voronezh, but also in the Moscow region. There they experienced firsthand the meaning of the word blackout. KTSN Week correspondent Oksana Rodionova has pieced together all the details of our strikes on the Russian Federation, and there is a clear sense of confidence. The Ukrainian armed forces are getting closer to cutting off even Moscow from electricity. Here are the details.
This is how spectacularly a shahed drone warehouse detonated this week on the territory of Donetsk airport. The result is impressive. Now more than 1,000 Russian Goran 2 drones will no longer be launched at us. With missiles and drones, our defenders also destroyed 1,500 sets of explosives for these UAVs, as well as the camouflaged infrastructure.
They were setting up bases specifically for the operators who control the shaheds remotely from a distance. Previously, that distance was about 50 to 70 kilometers last year, but now it is constantly, steadily increasing.
It became known as early as summer that the Russians were setting up closed warehouses and manual control points for the airfields. Since then, intelligence has been piecing together the puzzle step by step for a perfect strike. Partisans, the ATS, and the Yellow Ribbon are a great help in such operations. These are underground resistance members operating in the occupied territories, a resistance movement on the territory of the aggressor state. By the way, the latter has a dozen burned locomotives to its credit. And not only that.
This also includes obtaining certain information, tracking some aspects of enemy movements and locations, setting fire to power lines that supply enemy military facilities and other operations involving them that prevent the enemy from feeling secure.
It is not exactly known whether the partisans were involved in the downing of the Russian helicopter in Dagestan. Propagandists reported that there were tourists on board. In reality, the victims of this air crash were employees of the Krasnoyarsk electromechanical plant, which, among other things, manufactures mounts for launching cruise missiles and dropping munitions from aircraft. Not the sounds of Russian air defense, nor the hum of drones. Only these kinds of powerful explosions. This was Ukrainian rocket artillery striking the largest power plant in the Oryol region. This is already the second attack in the past 10 days. Last time it was hit by Neptunes. An interesting detail. Less than a kilometer from this power plant is an important Russian defense enterprise, Oryol Techmash, which manufactures special equipment for the army. Another major target this week, 350 kilometers from Moscow, is the Kostroma State District Power Plant, one of the largest power stations in Russia, capable of producing over 3,500 megawatts of electricity. Its smokestack, over 320 meters tall, is considered one of the highest in Europe. Blackouts were recorded in both Belgorod and Voronezh after our attacks on the power plants. But besides the power plants, our long reach also targeted substations that are key for Russians.
The main electricity generating enterprises are located precisely in the Moscow military district. And in fact, we want to cut Moscow off in a ring from the main territory of the Russian Federation. Because firstly, half of the brains are concentrated there, as well as a third of all scientific enterprises. That's why cutting off power to these sectors is a very, very high priority goal for us.
We have already attacked the cargo terminal of the Tuapse port in Krasnodar Krai for the second time. It is here that Putin's shadow fleet is loaded with oil. We struck both the pipeline and the tankers. 4 caught fire, 2 of which were filled to the brim with oil. Drones destroyed a small vessel called Nord. The pier and the pipeline were also hit. In total, since the beginning of the war, our defenders have carried out 150 powerful attacks on Russian oil and gas facilities. We swarm in like a cloud. Decoy drones, long-range UAVs, drones, missiles, Neptune with Flamingo. It's more effective this way. This way, there's a better chance to break through the stretched-out Russian air defense, which we are systematically taking out.
There are 2 points of concentration. One is the front line of the air defense system. The goal is not to let anything get past this line. The second is Moscow. The Russians' layered defense has already been thinned out significantly.
That's why all these Yar's missile tests and talks about Burevestniks with Oreshnik don't just fail to impress the world anymore. They actually infuriate the Russians themselves, who see mythical victories on TV, but out their windows they witness a convincing fire show from Ukraine's fierce polyanets and beavers.
Now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Lyman front. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. There were 9 combat engagements on the Lyman front today. The enemy attacked in the areas of the settlements Novy Mir, Glushchenkovo, Novomikhailovka, Druzhylyubovka, Grakovka, Stavki, and Lyman. 4 combat engagements are still ongoing. And now attention. There is another wave of mass mobilization in Russia, and it is being carried out secretly and unofficially. In particular, people are being taken to the front under the pretense of guarding strategic facilities. It's clear that, in reality, this is to send them to die in Ukraine. In fact, Russia has legalized a hybrid form of general mobilization. What new opportunities will the enemy have, and how can we counter them? That's exactly what this is about. Our next report.
In Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian armed forces are eliminating a huge number of occupiers, and in Rodinske, a key settlement that supports the entire Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration from the east, Ukrainian tank crews have crushed the Russian invaders to rubble.
Reports like these from the hottest spot in Donbas, Pokrovsk, are heard almost daily. October has already become the bloodiest month for the Russian forces in the entire war. However, it seems that November will break even this record. The colossal efforts of the defense forces have resulted in record losses for the Russian Federation, and as a consequence, a new wave of mobilization, so far a covert one.
This term should be understood to mean several things. It refers to the recruitment of conscripts for contracts, as well as the enlistment of reservists to guard important facilities, which the Russians have announced in many regions. This is a sign that the current flow of contract soldiers in Russia has decreased. The recruitment of foreigners also does not compensate for the losses in battle.
The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation claims that Pokrovsk has become the site of incredible Russian losses. According to reports from Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, in their attempt to occupy this city, more than 30,000 occupiers have already lost their lives. And their number is growing every day.
The fact that Pokrovsk has turned into yet another meat grinder for the Russian occupiers is undeniable. And in general, no one is hiding the fact that the concept, not the strategy of Ukraine's defense forces, is to deplete the enemy's offensive potential as much as possible, aiming to inflict the maximum possible damage so that they completely lack the strength and capability to continue and further expand their offensive operations. This is done to ensure that these enemy infiltrations do not, under any circumstances, turn into significant breakthroughs of our defensive lines and positions.
As always, the Kremlin decided to solve the issue through deception. Officially, they are not announcing a mobilization, but in reality, they are rounding up literally everyone the security forces and the military can get their hands on.
What characterizes this draft? Brutal raids that ignore all deferments, all supporting documents, basically anything at all. And these brutal raids are happening not only in Moscow, but now also in the regions. There are already reports of raids in Kazan and Khabarovsk. This is alarming, this is bad, because it's one thing to have raids in Moscow and Makhachkala, but it's another thing entirely when raids are happening in major cities with millions of residents. This means that now they will simply cover the entire territory as best they can, with police officers who will be rounding up all men of conscription age, wherever they are.
At the same time, the previous rule that conscripts do not fight on the front lines has been left behind. It's a thing of the past. Now, the year-round draft that has been announced provides the army with a constant influx of people. First and foremost, for recruitment purposes. And by the way, this recruitment is violent everywhere.
This means signing contracts under pressure. Let's call it emotional pressure. When conscripts are called up, they end up in the barracks. And there is still a lot of hazing in the Russian army to this day. Here, we've already forgotten what that's like. So you can put pressure on this recruit and force him to sign a contract that way. And then he is no longer a conscript, but a contract soldier. And as is well known, under Russian law, a contract soldier can be sent
directly to the front line.
Russian human rights activists say that the methods in Russia haven't changed, but the scale of such contract signings has increased dramatically. If before these were local initiatives, now the order has come from above. The goal is to forcibly keep as many people in the army as possible.
This hidden mobilization is ongoing. It hasn't just started. I repeat, it never actually stopped. It has been going on since the fall of 2022. This is just its latest phase.
Another method devised by the Russian military machine is to call up reservists to guard strategic facilities. The scheme is designed for the gradual deployment to the front of everyone who has ever been connected to the army. At first, these reservists will replace the current convoys whose fate is already sealed.
In this way, the state can take contract soldiers who are currently stationed in Region N, send them to the front, and instead regularly rotate reservists in their place. 2 months, 2 months, 2 months. That is, the training camps they will hold for reservists are specifically for guarding these.
And after several rotations, those very reservists will be sent to the front, and if there's time, they'll undergo a field military training camp. If Russian losses do not decrease, the briefing will take place right on the bus on the way to the war. Putin needs an uninterrupted supply of cannon fodder.
The enemy has thrown literally everything they have at Pokrovsk, but continues to suffer such devastating losses there that even their numerical advantage, in some areas up to 20 times, does not allow them to take control of this city.
Now let's analyze in detail the operational situation on the Alexandrovsk front. The enemy's army is up to its usual tricks here as well. On the Alexandrovsk front, Ukrainian defenders repelled 7 enemy attacks. 3 more clashes are still ongoing. The enemy attacked our positions near the settlements of Yalta, Zelenigay, Arestopol, Yegorovka, Pervomaiskaya, and Ribna. The settlement of Kosovtsevo was subjected to an airstrike. More and more military aid for Ukraine is coming from Poland. It's no coincidence that the country's president, Nawrocki, considers Moscow the main threat to Warsaw itself. We will tell you exactly what kind of military equipment will be sent to the front in the near future by our neighbors and main partners to successfully repel enemy attacks in our next report.
More than 120 billion zlotys, or $4 billion. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Poland has spent this impressive sum on aid to Ukraine. This includes both humanitarian and military support.
Poland was one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with tanks, ammunition, and defense equipment on a large scale. Between 2020 and 2023, it supplied, among other things, more than 300 tanks as well as armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, air defense systems, drones, mortars, assault rifles, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition. 10 airplanes and 10 helicopters were also sent to Ukraine. From 2022 to 2024, Poland delivered 47 packages of military aid to Ukraine. The value of equipment supplied in 2022 alone amounted to 7.23 billion zlotys, and in 2023 to 2024, another 5.63 billion. Poland also provided more than 19,500 Starlink terminals, ensuring stable satellite communication for the Ukrainian armed forces. This accounted for nearly half of all terminals used in Ukraine by the end of 2023.
Poland's assistance to Ukraine is not the result of romantic enthusiasm, but is very pragmatic. Our neighbors understand that if Ukraine falls, Poland will be next in line.
After all, a fighting Ukraine gives Europe time to better prepare for threats. This time is needed, and we cannot afford to lose a single minute. We will be held accountable for every minute.
318 tanks were supplied to Kyiv by Warsaw. Among them are modernized T-72s, M1R, PT-91, and Leopard 2 tanks. This is more than anyone else has provided. The total value of gratuitous aid, including training, logistics, repairs, and medical support, exceeded $4 billion by March of this year. Specifically, in 2022, it amounted to $1.6 billion. In 2023 to 2024, it was $1.3 billion. Poland also provided
Poland's military assistance: 586 armored vehicles, 137 artillery systems, 10 Mi-24 helicopters, 10 MiG-29 fighter jets, 287 man-portable air defense systems, 44 air-to-air missiles, and more than 100 units of small arms. 89 mortars, 4 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition.
In addition to gratuitous aid in just 2022 to 2023, Ukraine purchased weapons from Poland worth more than 2.2 billion euros. The largest contract was a deal for 54 Krab self-propelled howitzers. Of these, 36 have already been delivered. The countries are establishing joint production of weapons and equipment. The parties have agreed on the joint production of 125mm tank ammunition. There are also plans for joint production of other weapons and military equipment, including the placement of Polish company manufacturing facilities in Ukraine.
The industry needs to be mobilized. Polish and Ukrainian industries must make joint investments, not only during the war, but also to develop their deterrence potential. These initiatives are very much needed. It is also very important for us to improve economic relations. We will continue to support Ukraine.
Poland has become the main hub for supplying weapons to Ukraine. Also, during the war, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained on Polish territory. With each year of the war, the assistance and joint cooperation between Poland and Ukraine only grows stronger. Well,
let's now move to the Huliopol and Orikhiv directions of the front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. In the Huliopol direction, the enemy attacked the defense forces' positions 3 times in the areas of the settlements of Yablokove, Solodke, and Bilohiria. The settlement of Ternovata was subjected to airstrikes with guided aerial bombs. In the Orikhovsky direction, the aggressor carried out 9 attacks in the areas of Malaya Tokmachka, Stepovoye, Shcherbaki, Malye Shcherbaki, Primorsky, Stepnogorsk, and Plavny. In addition, the enemy launched an airstrike in the area of the settlement, Novodanilovka. You won't believe it, but the Russians once again tried to infiltrate the rear of the Ukrainian armed forces through a pipe. This happened in the Sumy region, and Ukrainian defenders managed to eliminate half of the invaders. But that's far from all the bad news for the enemy. Details about what is happening on the line of contact are coming up next in our military review.
Ukraine's defense forces struck a thermal power plant in Oryol, Russia. It is reported that Ukrainian Flamingo missiles were used in the strike.
Strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation, primarily those at a distance of more than 300 kilometers inside Russian territory, are being discussed. These are exclusively Ukrainian strike assets. These include Bober-type attack drones and, accordingly, aeroballistic strike systems, either the long-range Neptune or, accordingly, the Flamingo.
In addition to missiles, Russian strategic facilities were attacked by drones, which the Russian armed forces decided to shoot down directly over residential buildings. There is no talk of Russia controlling the city of Pokrovsk or of the Ukrainian Defense Forces grouping being operationally encircled. This was stated by the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Syrskyi.
According to the occupiers themselves, the Ukrainian Defense Forces are achieving tactical successes in the Pokrovsk direction, particularly in the area of Shakove. The Ukrainian Defense Forces have managed to significantly improve their tactical position, as well as in the area of Rodinsk. In the so-called Dobropilia direction, the occupiers are forced to admit the successful nature of the Ukrainian Defense Forces counterattacks, aimed at preventing the expansion of the enemy's presence in areas where they have so-called penetrated the Ukrainian defenses.
In these shots, Ukrainian defenders carried out a fire raid and cleared enemy positions in Donbas. A similar situation awaited the Russian invaders in the Kupyansk area. Meanwhile, in the Sumy region, the occupiers tried to get behind the Ukrainian armed forces, but as a result, half of them were immediately eliminated. The rest decided to retreat and regroup with other units. Russian propaganda is calling for the destruction of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and other Ukrainian cities.
At the same time, I warn you in advance, we do not understand, we are carrying it out.
In the Russian Federation, they want a major war and are preparing to start it on the European continent in 2029 or 2030, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
A possible scenario involving the so-called Suwalki corridor is not ruled out. That is, the creation of a land corridor that, according to their plan, would connect. Meanwhile, at the same time, meaning that two things are happening together simultaneously without any delay or pause between them.
The head of the Polish Medical Association said Ukraine is prepared to fight for 3 more years and wear Putin down.
Putin. The most recent and relevant decrees issued by the Russian dictator are pertaining to the year-round ongoing conscription into the armed forces of the occupying country's military. And the second is the involvement of so-called reservists in guarding key strategic facilities. Essentially, this is about covert mobilization.
Within a few weeks, the world's first drone wall is set to be put into operation in Ukraine. It is designed to destroy Russian attack drones. According to one of the founders of the developer company, the system has already been shipped to our country.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.